From a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, the top 5 reasons people tolerate your decorative penis gourd.
Oh dear.
And now, the podcast host who prefers expressing himself through mildly European swimwear, Pete Dominic!
Yes, indeed. You have got me nailed, as you always do, Pico. Thank you for another wonderful introduction, kicking off another wonderful week in the world. I am so happy to have you along the journey with me. Joining us today, Maura, Quint, for a great conversation about Rosh Hashanah. Happy New Year. Happy Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova, to any listeners who are celebrating. And, of course, I've also got Bill Boyle, Bill B in D.C., joining me to talk about the threat of nuclear war from Russia or a nuclear attack in Ukraine and so much more. That is who is on the show, and that is some of what we are talking about. Very happy to have you joining in. I've got some clips to play for you here at the top, and then we'll get right to those interviews. There are 43 days until the midterm elections, 36 days until Halloween / my birthday, when I will turn 47 years old. Tomorrow, my Julia turns 15. It's her quinceañera, which is in Mexico. That's a big deal. Celebration of a girl becoming a woman. But I don't know. We are simple whites, and so it's just going to be her 15th birthday. No, I guess we're Italian, if anything. We're ethnically Italian. At least Val is, and certainly is a big influence on the girls. And I don't think we did anything for special, particularly special for 15 for Ava, but I think Julia became a woman when she was like 12, really. She has been very mature and adult-like, for independent and confident for a while. Very, very proud of Julia. Very excited for her birthday. She's on the volleyball team. She's the vice president of her 9th grade freshman class. She's had her first month almost of high school under her belt. She gets along really well with her big sister. They're super close. Oh, that's going to be tough when Ava leaves for college next year. Ava visited Ithaca University over the weekend with Val and fell in love with it. So if anybody went to Ithaca or knows anything about Ithaca or Cornell, reach out and try to convince her to go or not. Also, consider sending us $50,000, or you could just edit your Patreon subscription up a little higher. These colleges are ridiculously expensive. We'll see what kind of offers for financial aid they make us. Otherwise, I'm going to tell both the girls the Marines are looking for a few good women. Although, don't tell that to Ben Shapiro. Let's get to some of those clips, starting with Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire. Very popular, influential conservative media outlet and host. He's very upset about the lack of masculinity in the military.
The people who tend to fight wars are typically very patriotic, very male people. I mean, I'm sorry to break it to you, but this has been the truth about military warfare for literally all of human history. And the institution of traditional masculinity has been core to that idea. But we're a society that doesn't believe in traditional masculinity. Traditional masculinity is an opponent because traditional masculinity requires roles. It says that men are supposed to protect, men are supposed to defend, men are supposed to be strong, men are supposed to be fathers and husbands. These are apparently very bad things now. You're not supposed to say these things.
Tim Wise tweeted, Ben Shapiro says he's very worried about the military abandoning traditional masculinity. Meanwhile, his vocal cords abandoned traditional masculinity decades ago. Hey, these aren't my standards, but they are his, so I'm just... Miss Betty Bowers tweeted about that. You know which military embraces traditional masculinity? The Russian army. And they suck. You know which military rejects pronouns and LGBTQ inclusion? The Russian army. And they suck. Michael Ian Black tweets, unsurprisingly, this is so dumb. Nobody's saying men shouldn't be strong. Nobody's saying men shouldn't be husbands or fathers, that they shouldn't protect or defend. What men like me are saying is that we don't have to be only those things and that women are also strong. Well said, Michael Ian Black. And I would only add that the guy's got no idea about the history of women fighting in combat. I mean, throughout human history, let's just look at the Soviets in World War II. There were tons of women snipers, Israelis. Of course, Dr. Ruth was a sniper. Dr. Ruth was a sniper in the Israeli Defense Forces. So, yeah, guy's got no idea what he's talking about, obviously, but somebody tweeted that out, and it went viral yesterday, so I figured we could have some fun with it, comment on it, and debunk it. And while we're talking about people who live on Earth 2, let's go to Fox News, where Trey Gowdy somehow had a satellite connection from his planet with disgraced two-time former Attorney General and real-life Humpty Dumpty Bill Barr on to make the most important point about the classified documents case with Donald Trump. Here they are on Fox News. Two conservative Trump supporters pointed out how Trump is absolutely F.
I think you put your finger on something, Mr. Attorney General. There's a lot of talk about the classification of these documents, but the government's position, at least now, is that the former president was not lawfully in possession of these documents regardless of their classification. Is that a fair summary?
That's right. That's right. And I think Judge Deary suggested the same thing, and the 11th Circuit suggested the same thing. It doesn't become his personal property simply because it's declassified. If it's declassified, it's still the government's. And charges of mishandling sensitive information are based on it being so-called national defense information. It doesn't have to be classified.
Well, there you go. Even the disgraced former president's disgraced former attorney general is telling you that he's cooked, at least that he can't be possessing these documents. The walls really are closing in on him this time. I don't know why I had to do Batman voice for that. But let's go to another scoundrel. It's Kevin McCarthy. He's the House Minority Leader. He really wants to be the next Speaker of the House. And even when he's giving interviews, he acts like he's giving a speech. And in this case, he said that Republicans would make the streets safer for our teenagers to buy fentanyl. Safe fentanyl.
We will secure our borders so your kids won't have to fear wondering that they're buying fentanyl and are going to OD.
No, we want them to buy that pure, the pure American smack that we know so well. We want to promise America's kids will only have the purest heroin. Somebody wrote, make Class A drugs great again. And just a reminder, about 90% of fentanyl seizures happen at legal ports of entry. And 86% of those convicted are actually U.S. citizens, according to the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian place, but they are very much pro-drugs. So take it for what it's worth. All right, here's Michael Moore on Friday night, HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Michael Moore predicting a big win for Democrats in the fall, and here he is coming in remotely. Somehow he's that good, important of a guest. He can do the show virtually.
You know, you and I are two well-known pessimists, I think, and I have never felt this optimistic. And I was on your show here, what's now 6 years ago, when I said that Trump was going to win, and the audience booed me, and you stood up for me. I was just saying, I'm out, I'm around. I'm from the Midwest. I think I had a pretty good sense of what was going to happen. I think the opposite's going to happen this time. I think that there is going to be such a landslide against the traitors, especially the 147 Republicans who just hours after the insurrection voted to not certify the elected president of the United States, Joe Biden.
Well, there you go. Michael Moore on HBO's Real Time making a bold prediction about these midterm elections that doesn't mean that we can rest. We must continue to do everything that we can, from the school boards to the state house to Congress, to get people who live on Earth 1 elected. So keep up the good work, everybody. But I thought that was fun to hear. Now, I listened to ABC's This Week when I was working in the shed, cleaning out the shed yesterday. Not the Shedio where I do the podcast where I am now. No, I'm talking about the storage shed, the extra shed that I built with Tom from Noble Pies after I took the old storage shed over to do an independent podcast. Anyway, I was listening to the George Stephanopoulos on the ABC, and he had this Republican senator on who's awful, but his name is Senator John Barroso. He is from Wyoming. You got to listen to this whole clip because he asked him the question about Trump. Can he declassify the documents? And then Barrasso goes on this long-winded bullshit answer, but listen to how Stephanopoulos comes back and how Barrasso just comes clean at the end. It's worth it. And I remember exactly where I was, sorting out some screws in the shed when I heard this.
A bit against Putin as well. I want to ask you about the investigation into Donald Trump's handling of classified information. Even though his lawyers have provided no evidence that he declassified the documents, Trump said this week that as president, he could declassify documents by thinking about it. Do you agree with that?
I've not heard that one before, George. Like, I'll tell you, in terms of national security documents, we have to always use extreme caution. I'm on the Foreign Relations Committee. We deal with classified information all of the time and are always very careful. I don't know what anything about the rules for when a president declassifies documents and information. What I do know is, what I'd like to see from a Senate standpoint is, I'd like to see the Department of Justice come to us and show us in a classified setting what the information is, what they've done. I thought the raid at the former president's home, never seen anything like that before, clearly, and has become political. So I want to get a briefing so that we can then be informed to see what actually happened here.
That was a rhetorical question. You know that a president can't declassify documents by thinking about it. Why can't you say so?
No, I don't think a president can declassify documents by saying so, by thinking about it.
Senator Barrasso, thanks for joining us this morning.
Well, he decided better of it at the end. Stephanopoulos gave him another opportunity, and he decided to say the right thing, which shouldn't be a hard thing to do there at the end. And now I want to play for you one more clip from a Sunday show. This is Chuck Todd. He was going viral because he asked Nancy Mace, Republican Congresswoman from South Carolina, if they took over the House, would they impeach Joe Biden? People were outraged by this because Chuck Todd didn't put some context in, saying that there would be no reason to impeach Joe Biden. He hasn't done anything impeachable. But anyway, here it is.
Republicans pitched, Kevin McCarthy put out his pitch for, they called it a commitment to America on this. And part of it in there was accountability, and it's kind of vague. But you've heard some of the details, and I know you've talked about the idea that there may be a special select committee. Do you expect an impeachment vote against President Biden if Republicans take over the House?
I believe there's a lot of pressure on Republicans to have that vote, to put that legislation forward and to have that vote. I think that is something that some folks are considering.
Wow.
Again, I'm someone who wants to I want to follow the Constitution. It's really important. Oversight's important. But when I think of oversight of the federal government, I'm thinking about the waste, the fraud, and the abuse for the COVID-19 funding. You saw this administration just charge 44 people with a crime of stealing from the federal government $250 million. Those are the kinds of things that we need to make sure we have oversight on. Getting to the origins of COVID-19, better understanding how it happened, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. We want to make sure that it doesn't happen again, at least in our lifetime, and we're keeping everyone safe in our country and around the world, too.
But if these impeach Biden votes come up, how are you going to vote?
Again, I'm going to read how that bill is filed, what's in it, what evidence there was. I didn't vote to impeach the former president of the United States because I felt like due process was stripped away. I will not vote for impeachment of any president if I feel that due process has been stripped away for anyone.
Such a weak defense, the whole due process thing, nonetheless, and a weak question probably from Chuck Todd without a follow-up, but that's what he's known for. All right, now I've got to play for you one more very ominous thing. I talk about this with Bill Boyle and a lot in our conversation. But last night on 60 Minutes, you had the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, on. Jake Sullivan was on the Sunday show's national security advisor to Joe Biden. But Antony Blinken is, of course, the Secretary of State. He was on with Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes, who his CBS colleague, Stephen Colbert, talks about how much of a stud he is. He called him something about a daddy. Scott Pelley, the CBS daddy, I don't know, it was hilarious. He's a very sexy man, very tough sounding guy. Here he is, though, Scott Pelley with the Secretary of State scaring us.
How concerned should Americans be about the prospect of nuclear war?
Scott, we've heard a lot of irresponsible rhetoric coming out of Vladimir Putin, but we're focused on making sure that we're all acting responsibly, especially when it comes to this kind of loose rhetoric. We have been very clear with the Russians publicly and as well as privately to stop the loose talk about nuclear weapons.
Privately, the United States has been in communication with the Kremlin about these threats of nuclear war.
Yes, it's very important that Moscow hear from us and know from us that the consequences would be horrific, and we've made that very clear.
You call the nuclear talk loose talk, but isn't Vladimir Putin telling us what he's going to do if he is backed any further into a corner?
Vladimir Putin has a clear way out of the war he started, and that's to end it. If Russia stops fighting, the war ends. If Ukraine stops fighting, Ukraine ends.
Is there anyone in the Kremlin who can tell Vladimir Putin no if he decides to launch a battlefield nuclear weapon?
They have a chain of command. Whether it works or not, to be seen. But I think what you're pointing to is a larger challenge, and that is the Achilles heel of autocracies anywhere. There is usually not anyone who has the capacity or the will to speak truth to power. And part of the reason I think Russia has gotten itself into the mess that it's in is because there is no one in the system to effectively tell Putin he's doing the wrong thing.
In our interview last week, President Biden told us that he had a message for Vladimir Putin on the use of nuclear weapons.
Don't.
He went on to say the U.S. response would be consequential. What did he mean by that?
I'm not going to get into what the consequences would be. Any use of nuclear weapons would have catastrophic effects for, of course, the country using them, but for many others as well.
If you can't give us specifics about a U.S. response, can you tell us that the administration has a plan?
We do.
Is it a plan that would prevent World War III?
President Biden has been determined that as we're doing everything we can to help the Ukrainians defend themselves, as we're doing everything we can to rally other countries to put pressure on Russia, we're also determined that this war not expand, not get broader.
All right, I'll talk more with Bill about that coming up. But if that scares you, I've got a little bit of a palate cleanser for you. Friday night, Elton John was at the White House because apparently Joe Biden is a huge Elton John fan. I mean, that's not the only reason, but when you're the president of the United States, you can invite people to come and perform, and they generally do. And they had this concert in collaboration with A&E Networks and the History Channel called A Night When Hope and History Rhyme. And apparently there's a connection between President Biden and Elton John. Joe Biden wrote in his memoir, "Promise Me, Dad, a Year of Hope, Hardship, and Purpose," that he used to listen to Elton John's music with his sons, Bo and Hunter Biden. And years later, when Bo was ill with cancer, Biden would sing the artist's songs to him in the hospital. And so anyway, this is a special moment at the White House when President Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden surprised Elton John at the concert with the Humanities Award.
It's my great honor, and I mean this sincerely, to present the National Humanities Medal to Sir Elton John. Major Yang, please read the citation.
On it, sir. Good evening, everyone. The President of the United States awards this National Humanities Medal to Sir Elton John for moving our souls with his powerful voice and one of the defining songbooks of all time. An enduring icon and advocate with absolute courage who found purpose to challenge convention, shatter stigma, and advance the simple truth that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect.
All right, the crowd goes wild here for about a minute. I'm gonna cut that short.
I just said to the First Lady, I'm never flabbergasted, but I'm flabbergasted and humbled and honored by this incredible award from the United States of America. I will treasure this so much, and it will make me double my efforts to make sure this disease goes away. Your kindness, America's kindness to me as a musician is second to none. But in the war against AIDS and HIV, it's even bigger. And I can't thank you enough. I'm really emotional about this. Thank you.
By the way, it's all his fault that we're spending $6 billion in taxpayer money this month to help fight HIV/AIDS.
Well, there you go. I thought that would be a nice moment to share with you before I jump into my first interview and, jumping out of the nuclear weapons conversation with Scott Pelley and Anthony Blinken. So there you go. All right, there's some clips for you, and now it's time to get to my first guest. Coming up, Bill Boyle. Bill B in D.C. and I talk about the threat that he thinks there is, that Putin could actually use a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, and it's pretty upsetting, but a sobering conversation I think you will like and be interested in. But first, I've got a more fun conversation, I think it's fair to say, with the writer and activist Maura Quint, who joins me almost every Monday for Maura Mondays. We always have fun and catch up, and she educated me and enlightened me on all things Rosh Hashanah. She took a break in between cooking to sit down and talk with me on Sunday afternoon. And here is my conversation. She's epic and prolific on Twitter at Behind Your Back. Follow her there. Let her know you heard her here on the show. It's time for Maura Mondays. There she is, Maura Quint, kicking off another week with you. And I want to just begin by saying happy Rosh Hashanah, Shana Tova.
Yes. Shana Tova. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
Yeah, but that was good. That was really good.
You are taking a break from cooking up a storm. Please let us know how you celebrate this holiday, and if you would like to let us know what you're making, we can smell it.
Oh, sure, yeah. Of course, you want to smell it. Think, smell yeast, like the good kind of yeast, not the bad kind of yeast, like the positive kind. Because I'm making some challah right now.
Oh, right.
I'm trying to make challah. It's not going great.
Have you done that before? Are you good at that?
I have done it before, and I am usually pretty good at it. You know what it is? I'm like a dude who's just entering like maybe his 50s. Like every third time, it does not get the rise you want it to get. Like it's just not getting up in the way that it needs to.
I really resent that. So today is the start of Rosh Hashanah, also known as the Jewish New Year, marks the beginning of the Jewish High Holy Days. I'm reading. The millennial old holiday is an occasion for reflection and often marked by prayer, symbolic foods, and the blowing of a traditional horn called I think it's pronounced shofar. And so what is your celebration? How religious do you get? And will you be blowing anything?
Wow. That's a very personal question. And I feel like we should start with drinks before you ask me what I'm going to be blowing. Pete.
What? It's just a horn.
That's what they all say.
Come back to my car and blow my shofar. Is that what happens?
It's a very, very sexy Rosh Hashanah pickup line. You just hit right upon it. There you go. You're now a member of the tribe. That's how it works.
Wow, that was easy.
Yeah, well, that's the other pickup line. So Rosh Hashanah, it's Rosh Hashanah into Yom Kippur are the holiest holidays of the Jewish tradition and Jewish religion. I'm not super religious, so we won't be going to temple or synagogue. We just have a nice like Rosh Hashanah dinner. And then, sometimes I do try to go to synagogue for Yom Kippur, but that's been a while. That's been a minute. So probably not going to do that. And as for the shofar, my 4th grade son just signed up for a band and brought home a trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that counts. Like I've already had to.
Wow, the racket.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. Grown-ups are trying to kill me this week. I don't know what's going on. I thought we had like some sort of like not class solidarity, but like age solidarity or something. But his karate instructor sent home a note saying that they are doing really well with their nunchucks and I should get home nunchucks so they can practice. And then the music teacher sends him home with a trumpet. And I don't know why I've been marked as some sort of evil that needs to be dealt with. But
maybe because you and your kid's father have chosen to enter your kids into as many different types of activities and opportunities as you can to see what fits. And maybe they'll be weapons experts and maybe they'll be composers, but you're giving them the opportunity to choose. And I think that's wonderful. I do think that giving your kids nunchucks is a terrible choice. But listen, you're doing you. I know that my brother and I made them. Sure. Lots of them. We made lots, and we just cut sticks in half and connected them via a chain, and then he would hit me with them. But hey,
yeah, no, that's I think why they're doing so well in class. They've had lots of practice with things they've rigged together thus far. So yeah, they're definitely advanced in that.
By the way, it's a
level.
weird weapon to imagine using of self-defense. Like you're being assaulted on the street and you just pull out a pair of nunchucks.
Yeah, but like imagine if you did, how intimidated would that attacker be?
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's a good point.
The moment you pull out, you don't even have to use them. Like the person just like, no, this is not worth
Right.
it. No, how much was I going to get off? Nope, done.
That's
That
a
guy just
great
pulled out
point. You should
nunchucks.
just take out a sword and twirl it, or a spear and just twirl it around, and then the person's like, I'm not messing. This guy's like Jack Reacher meets a ninja.
Yeah, you don't have to be trained in these things. If you just like, there are a lot of, I mean, even if you just took out like a sledgehammer, I think people would just be like,
I
oh
don't
shit.
know.
Like, I don't know why this person has that ready to go.
Why this
and it's
person,
just like,
it wouldn't seem to be worth it to be carrying around a sledgehammer just for the maybe potential that there's going to be. It's a heavy item, I'm saying, Maura.
well, and I'm saying you and I obviously have different priority sets because I'd really enjoy watching someone's face go from, aggressive to terrified.
I hope listeners send Maura like 100 sledgehammers. They're going to be costly to ship because they're so heavy, but
You just have to go with Peter Gabriel's version. That's much cheaper.
I don't know how that's going to help you in an attack,
No.
but you just start playing it. And
I think that actually would work as well. I think a lot of people would just be like, I'm out. I'm done here.
I can't.
What is this?
I
What is
can't
wrong
hear
with
it
her?
ever again. The shofar, by the way, is blown as a call to repentance.
Yes. Yes.
Are
This
you?
is a big
What are you?
repentance holiday.
Do you want to share on the podcast what you're repenting for? Eating sweets is a great way to celebrate. I'm reading.
Yeah. Do I want to share what I'm repenting for? I mean, I haven't quite figured it all out yet. Like, so the whole, I actually really like, I will say, I really like this element of Judaism, and I really like the high holidays. I like Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I love the concept of it. I think it really appeals to me because Judaism is a very humanistic religion. So it's not about really necessarily this like idea of heaven and the afterlife, or at least not the tradition of Judaism that I was raised in, I should say. But it's really much more about being a good person here on earth during your life. And so Rosh Hashanah, the idea is the book of life is opened, and on Yom Kippur, it's closed. And so you have this like 1 week to like get in good. Like they're going to write down what's going to happen to you for the next year. And like, you got to make sure like, you're on the right side of things. So you have this 1 weekish period of time to go back through your last year and try and figure out like, what did I do that was bad? And more to the point, what did I do that hurt other people? And what I love about Judaism is it's not about like now you just have to pray to God and like say, I'm sorry about all that. You have to actually go to the people that you hurt and right those wrongs with them. God can't forgive you if they don't forgive you.
Thank you.
I love it. It's like such to me, just a really wonderful thing to pause every year and be like, how was I a piece of shit this year? Like, let's actually think about that for a second.
Do you actually reach out to people and say, hey, sorry for my dickishness?
I mean, certainly like, within my family, we all do definitely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
wonderful.
But I mean, do I reach out as far as I should? No, absolutely not. I've never called up an ex-boyfriend, but like, there's, there's so much that I've done. Certainly, if I felt like there was something, it's a good time to like kind of reflect on, is there something that's unresolved? Is there someone that maybe you are holding on to something that you shouldn't be, or that you want to like let them know we're good and it's okay. And either I'm sorry, but also I forgive you. It's also a moment to recognize if you're carrying around grudges and anger at other people and try and maybe grapple with that. And obviously these are like, this is a big question and people have huge emotional experiences that they can't necessarily like just wrap up all tidy in a week or anything. But I think it's a nice moment of time to just kind of pause and self-reflect and try and sort of set a better course, because it is the Jewish New Year. So it's all the sort of things that you think of with New Year's Eve and December 31st and resolutions, but it's much more about sort of personal, internal, like, how can I be a better person? Much less about like, how can I lose 20 pounds? Much more like, how can I lose 20 pounds of worry and guilt?
Right. Well, I like that. I love the way you described it. Certainly what it means to you. And you do this every year. You have this kind of cleanse.
Every year. Yeah.
Spiritual cleansing, if you will.
And then it ends with, on Yom Kippur, you literally do fast. It is quite quite literally a cleanse.
So, and then renewal, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah.
And what will you get together with your family on this evening and you will eat?
And we will eat. Yep. So for traditional foods with Rosh Hashanah, it's things that symbolize the new year and like ongoingness and unbroken things. So you eat things that are round. So you make your challah into a circle. And then it's about sweetness as well, because you want to have a sweet new year. So apples dipped in honey. So it's something round and something sweet. That's very traditional. So a lot of Rosh Hashanah foods will incorporate honey and apples and things like that into them. Yeah.
I love it.
I love it too. I actually really do.
Yeah, I don't really have anything like that. I guess Christmas is a thing, but we don't do anything spiritual for any
Christmas is definitely a thing. I mean, I've lived in this country for a pretty long time.
Yeah, but like to me, it just means you get a day off and you do presents and all the things. I love Christmas. Don't get me wrong. I love all the decorating around it, but there's no like kind of spiritual cleanse of any sort. There's no renewal of anything. There's no traditions, at least not in my family. If there was, I don't. We get together. We have like a pseudo Italian feast, and that's it.
Yeah,
usually
well, you guys are supposed to be doing the the Catholics at least, or the confession every week and stuff. You know, you're supposed to be doing that.
I have a whole 15-minute chunk in my stand-up act about that. I think that's just and I imagine that you and anybody who has never done it must think it's an absolutely bizarre tradition to go into a booth with a priest and tell him your most private quote sins, and then he's going to tell you.
Just hope he's not getting off on them. Yeah, that's kind of weird.
There's a lot of those jokes in it. Yeah, for sure.
Sure,
why am I the idea of confessing to a Catholic priest is a bit bizarre, I think.
I think it definitely is. Yeah.
And then
even if I were sitting at a bar and there was like a Catholic priest to one side of me and just a random stranger to the other, I'd probably be, drunkenly confessing my stuff to the other guy.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, you probably at least have had sex, right? Like at least consensual sex. So,
that's what experiences, Father, are you drawing from as you give me? But there's not insight. There's usually just like, go say, my recollection was like, I had to go say a bunch of Hail Marys in the pew. And I mean, it's always worth getting things off your chest in a way, but what a weird, anonymous, I don't know, write in a journal. I wrote in a journal.
Right. Yeah, no, or go to a therapist. They tend to, I guess it's free. Well, if you're tithing, it's not free. It's very complicated. It's very complicated.
Bizarre.
Oh, but, since it's Rosh Hashanah, Pete, I should apologize to you for however I have wronged you this past year, which I think mostly means just showing up late to every single one of these recordings.
Yeah.
I will be better at that.
Yeah, I was tapping
I know.
My
every
foot.
time I can see that you're just seething.
Every year
at rage.
Around this time, I wait for your apology for something.
I mean, I'm sure there's other things that I'll have to think about how else I have wronged you.
You've bailed me out of several things over the last couple of years privately, which, so if anything, there should be some holiday where I just send you some kind of I don't know. At this point of the year, I'm going to send you a jack-o'-lantern that I carved.
You think that's what I want? You think I want a carved jack-o'-lantern?
I would think that you would want some kind of art crafted by me. Yeah, I do.
Wow. Okay. And you think that a jack-o'-lantern is art crafted by you? I just want to make sure I have all the terms here.
If you don't want that, I could come up with something else, but I thought it was inappropriate.
I do love smashing things with baseball bats. Actually, I would enjoy that a lot.
You would smash the jack-o'-lantern that I sent you? Is that what you're saying? And you would do it on video and share it
from it, wouldn't you?
So it would be like I would be sending you a rotting gourd. Really
yes, you would be a rotting gourd. Yeah. It actually seems much more like a threat than a present. Really, just like here's trash I found growing.
I don't know.
I stabbed it a bunch of times and sent it to
you. here's some rotting vegetables. Happy. Thanks for all the help.
I carved a face in it. It's supposed to be you.
I saw a guy carving a pumpkin with a power washer. I watched this on TikTok, apparently, because I had nothing else going on in my life. He was shooting a pumpkin with a power washer and carving it out. And I watched the whole video, start to finish. It was about 30 seconds of my life.
Yeah. Why did you do that?
I don't know.
Also, that doesn't make sense. That just sounds like he's exploding a pumpkin.
Yeah, it didn't look great, but... I don't know what you do when you're lying in bed and right before you are about to fall asleep. You're probably reading or writing with a quill.
Oh,
ink.
yeah. I do love a good quill. I got a whole bunch of birds out back. I just pluck them from.
I didn't realize that. We learn a lot. Well, listen, happy Rosh Hashanah, everybody. Shana Tova. There are 14.8 million Jewish people around the world practicing Rosh Hashanah. Many of them not very, particularly religious, but ethnically and
there's actually so few of us. It is utterly fascinating to me. Every time I see like the percentage of Jews in the U.S., I'm always just like, wait, how is it that small?
Well, it's amazing because
there's a lot more of us.
You control so much with such a small percentage.
Yeah, sure. That's why we go to the meetings. We're very organized.
Speaking of control, and I want to ask you, I'm going to ask you this every week. Anything you're watching whenever I get to talk to you as we approach the midterms? We're now, 6 weeks away?
Oh God, are we?
How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Last night, Michael Moore on Real Time with Bill Maher, your favorite show, apparently. I don't know if you like Michael Moore. I know you don't like Bill Maher, who's predicting. He was predicting a landslide. Maher was like, "Shut up! Don't say that." But anything that you're thinking about watching locally, statewide, any election at all?
He was predicting a Democratic landslide?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, I started to get like a little bit optimistic, and then I got slapped down by some friends and coworkers who were just like, it's going to be a red wave. Like, don't, no, they would not. Like, they didn't let me. They instantly were just like, nope.
Documentary filmmaker Michael Moore said Friday believes there will be a massive turnout of women during the 2022 midterm elections.
Maybe, but I don't know if that's necessarily good. There's a lot of us that suck too. We're on both sides of this thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting to hear him say that because he.
I think that people think that the abortion issue is going to be obviously very motivating, and I'm just still. I mean, it is very much what I said to you last week. I think I'm just very, very nervous about the ways that the Republicans have rigged these things already. So I think we might see a surge in voter turnout. I just don't know that translates into a surge of Democratic candidates being elected, which I know is a weird thing to say, but that's where we are in gerrymander world.
Yeah, because of the way the districts vote and gerrymandering and redistricting. Yeah, no, those are fine and fair points. I mean,
I don't see a ton of like Democratic upsets, I guess, is sort of, there's not anything where I'm watching. I guess, I don't know. Do you know where Mandela Barnes is polling right now?
No.
That's an interesting race. And I don't have a lot of hope because I have not ever had any reason to have any hope there. But I do think that he's a really strong candidate. So
he's in Wisconsin running against Ron Johnson.
Yeah.
Right?
Who is absolutely terrible. Ron Johnson is, Ron Johnson, Ron DeSantis, all the Rons, all bad. All bad guys.
All Rons are bad. What did you think of that stunt that shipping those seeking asylum that were legally here? Did we talk about that last week? I think we might have. I don't know.
I feel like we might have. I know. Do you remember what last week was?
Well, this past week was when I was out here in the shed doing some redesign work. And when I had the TV on, and then I saw the Attorney General of New York State come on, Tish James, and make the announcement about the Trump organization and what she had on them. And I just am like, I'm pretty sure it's curtains for his business. I
really?
I don't even see any way around it. But I don't know who you've been watching or paying attention to. But yeah, they got him red-handed with tons of documentation. Or I don't think she would have brought the case even.
I mean, I agree that it's all there. I agree that he should. I don't see anything ever happening. I've lost all faith. I mean, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen. I do think that whatever the workaround will be, they'll find it. They're very good at that.
They always have been. I think I kind of feel like this time it's different, and I'm buying the walls are closing type of analogies because he's not going to be able to borrow any money. He's not going to be able to get any really great high-priced layers. He doesn't pay anybody. He's got no cash on hand, apparently.
This is the thing I do not understand. The one thing I can't, I try to find a way to make sense of it, but the amount of people who still work with him all the time. Like, I understand that there are plenty that, are going to get a bump in prestige. They think they'll they're literally doing it for the exposure, right? Like if I'm working for Trump, then I'll be able to get a Fox News pundit job or whatever. And it doesn't matter that I'm making absolutely no money at this. But I still get really, really confused and surprised why these people are doing this, because they're all fundamentally ego-driven, self-interested pieces of shit. Like, it's not as though they're not. They all individually are. And I don't think that they're getting much benefit from trying to work for him.
I think because the same reason I did The Apprentice in 2004, I don't want to brag, but because at that point, it was a great exposure. I think that's been the truth about Trump and so many other opportunists in the world. But I think that's changing because he's no longer something that you should cozy up to, which is why the quality of the lawyer and supporter, apparently I just read today, like the people that are going are like these, like not very smart rednecks that are showing up at Mar-a-Lago. Like, he's getting a lower and lower kind of,
but he's pandering to it too. Now he's like breaking out so much of the QAnon stuff.
Yeah. Cause he can still get money from them.
Yeah. I mean, and they'll float him for a really long time. There's plenty of his people, I mean, that have enough funds to keep him going in these kind of like medium small donations.
But he's going to need a whole lot of money for, I mean, all these different legal cases. I don't know. I've been listening to a lot of legal analysis, and today, as a matter of fact, and everybody's talking about how there's like 3 legitimate cases, and they come for him and his family, and he's got to spend money on the lawyers, and he doesn't have great lawyers, and more importantly, they got him like so red-handed with these documents in his house.
I guess it's just like the moment you're looking at someone who buries his ex-wife on a golf course in order to get a tax break. It's just like, I don't know. I mean, like I don't know how one evades the law in these ways, but I have a feeling I'm going to learn about a whole bunch of new ways that people can just do terrible things to avoid consequence, because I mean, he is the master of that. He is the master of avoiding consequence.
No doubt about that. But I think, we'll see.
I can't wait to see, where else people get buried, basically.
Seriously, just a bizarre family that anybody looks at. I'm not going to lie. I'm still fascinated by all of it, that every day that anybody could look at him and be like, yeah, that's
the guy.
That's my guy. Like anybody that, as you were mentioning earlier, cozies up to him gets burnt. Like, it's a bad idea to get close to him, whether he's vice president or his lawyer.
You know what? Although, like, this is not obviously on the same scale, even a little bit, but this is just a weird little thing. I'm on Twitter too much, and there's no one in particular that anyone would know that I could point to. But I have seen multiple times of years of being on Twitter, there will be like an account that exists, some person who is really aggressive and angry and starts fights constantly.
Yeah.
And like, I just watch every single day as people who follow this person, who know exactly who they are, like, see it, continue to like make polite disagreements, knowing that this person is going to just go at you. They're going to act as though you just punched them straight in the face, and they're going to respond with a tremendous amount of aggression. And I'm like, every single time, I'm like, you've seen over and over, this is how this person responds.
Yeah.
Why do you not believe it? Why do you have to touch the stove? What are you doing? And it seems to me like there are just large portions of humanity that just cannot accept things until they have experienced them. Like, they just keep this like weird, I don't know what it is, gauze over everything, where they're like, that's not what's really happening. And I'm sure it wouldn't happen to me.
Like COVID. I mean, that's a huge percentage of conservative-minded Americans who have gotten very ill or died because they didn't believe there was a thing or that the vaccine worked. I mean, and you talk about the stove touching them. It's COVID.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's just these huge swaths that are like, they have such this belief in their own personal supremacy in some way that like, I would never, ever have to suffer any of these consequences, clearly, for I am the protagonist of reality and I survived the movie. Like, it's so strange.
All right, I'll let you go because you gotta have to get back to cooking. But just again, you're making bread. But what can you tell us? Anything else that you'll be eating this evening? Is there a traditional meal?
Well, no, my mom always makes like a chicken. We don't do a lot of the sort of. My mom will be making a kugel. I suppose that there is.
I'm sorry.
A kugel. A kugel is
that when you try to prevent yourself from urinating?
Yes, and it's really good for sex too, especially the noodle kugel. But it's like a lasagna almost. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like a baked thing. And usually noodle kugel is the sort of traditional one. People often make them kind of sweet, even with like raisins and noodles. That's not at all what we have. We have always done a potato kugel, which is really just like, I don't know. It's like a potato casserole, like a hash brown casserole.
Good.
I don't even know how else
that
to
sounds
describe
good.
it.
I like that. I'm into that.
Yeah, if you like potatoes, you know,
I
you
like
can't go
anything
wrong.
with.
Really.
I like anything with potatoes. Love potatoes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's pretty much. And
Potato
then we'll
kugel.
Potato kugel. Yeah. See, I'll send you some potato kugel. There you go.
At least a picture. Could you please share a picture of potato kugel on social media and wish everybody a happy Rosh Hashanah?
Okay, I can definitely do the second one, but you know, I'm sorry, you're trying to get rid of me, but I have thoughts.
Go ahead, no.
Not all food should be photographed. Not all food. Like, people can be very proud of the thing they made, and they went to so much effort and they spent hours, and it could taste absolutely amazing, but then they post these pictures online. First of all, food photography is really hard, but then they post pictures online. It's just like, thank you so much for sharing your giant pile of crap with us. I absolutely disgusting.
I don't even know I can't even believe you have so many thoughts about food photography.
I have a lot of thoughts about
I know,
food
I can tell.
Photography.
Holy shit.
I know.
I suggested you take a picture of the potato kugel. I didn't know I was walking into.
Pete, I am holding so much back right now because I know there's not time. I gotta go make sure that the bread is going. But like, you bank this one, all right? Because I got a lot to say.
All right, well, please share it next time. I know where we'll begin next week. Thank you, Maura. Happy Rosh Hashanah. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
There you go. Maura Quint, everybody. Learned a lot about Rosh Hashanah and more. Always a great way to kick off the week, a conversation with Maura. Go follow her on Twitter at Behind Your Back. Wish her a happy Rosh Hashanah. And now it's time to get to my second conversation for today's show. This is our friend Bill Boyle, Bill B in D.C. On last Thursday night's hangout, we had about 50 subscribers, and towards the end, we about 30 people left. A lot of conversation about this guy. Bill wasn't there, but the reason why listeners said that they trusted him more than some of the other experts that they listened to and that I talked to is because he doesn't have anything to gain. He's not trying to get subscribers or followers or money or sell advertising or get ratings. He's just a guy who's really interested in these issues, cares a lot about them, very well-spoken, very connected, and people have grown to trust him as a result. It was an awesome conversation when we were just gossiping about Bill and how much people loved when he joined the show. And so, without further ado, he's not a CIA agent or analyst, doesn't work for the government. He owns and operates parking garages in Washington, D.C., grew up in New Jersey. Catholic Irish boy. It's time for Bill Boyle at Bill B in D.C.
Bill B in D.C. Bill B in D.C. He's a D.C. insider's insider. He runs parking garages and you can park inside there. He's got an opinion on everything. Well, that's kind of his thing, but he backs it up with a mountain of knowledge. I would bet he even went to college. He does the research nobody else wants to do, and he presents it all to me and you. Bill B in D.C.
There you go, Gareth Sever with the Bill Boyle jingle, and he is here, and we were talking about him at the Hangout on Thursday night. Were your ears burning?
They were, or that might have been the beer I was consuming, but yes.
Yeah, we missed you.
Yeah. A lot of burning going on. A lot of burning.
Well, did you go to college?
I went to GW, yeah.
Is that how you ended up in D.C.?
It is. I went to came to D.C. to go to school, and then I stayed here.
And then, is that when you started gathering intel?
I started gathering intel originally when I was 16, because we were trying to figure out how to buy beer. And so we scoped out, the bridge over to Staten Island and where the liquor store was. And one thing led to another, and here I am.
I wanted to talk with you about several things. Let me just read some of the headlines. Well, really, I wanted to talk to you about Russia and their invasion of Ukraine. And just some of the headlines from the past week. Here they are. Facing protests at home and diminished forces in Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin moves to bolster his army and crack down on dissent. He apparently arrested protesters and then threw them into the army, which is weird. A U.S. national security advisor vowed catastrophic consequences if Russia used a nuclear weapon in Ukraine. That was Jake Sullivan on a couple of the Sunday shows, Bill. Russian orchestrated referendums are underway in 4 Ukrainian regions. The voting, asking residents whether they want to join Russia, is dismissed as a sham by Ukraine and Western governments and every expert that I've heard and listened to. Finally, activists have raised concerns that ethnic minorities are being disproportionately drafted into the military service. Oh, and wait, this one from last week. A UN-appointed panel of independent legal experts said in a damning statement that conclude war crimes have been committed that Russian soldiers have raped and tortured children in Ukraine. So a lot going on. And of course, I didn't even get to the fact that Vladimir Putin is saber rattling about using nuclear weapons. So which of those headlines or anyone that I didn't mention do you want to pick up on?
I think that a good way to do this, excuse me, is to start out with sort of framing it. Okay. And I think that an important thing, which I've said before to you, is that a country that's winning is creating more options for itself in a war. A country that's losing a war is having fewer and fewer options that it can take, right? And where we are right now, very clearly, is at an inflection point where Russia's ability to win the war without doing mobilization, right, and without doing a bunch of other things that I'll get to in a minute, it went away. Its ability to fight the war with the army that it had and to have any possibility even of holding the line, right, much less winning, came down to where they had no choice effectively but to declare mobilization. And a mobilization is an extraordinarily politically dangerous thing for Vladimir
Before
Putin.
you get to the politics of it, I just wanted to read one tweet. I saw somebody write, Ukrainians smashed professional army in 7 months. Can you imagine how much time they'll need to smash the unprofessional one? Don't you? I mean, Shouldn't we start with what kind of a mobilization? Who are these people that are mobilizing? Are they?
Sure. So, and this ties into the political danger of it, right?
Okay.
What they're basically doing is they're really aiming for mobilizing 1.2 million men in this round. That's going to be men in large part between 19 and 30, say. They are kind of the core people in their core working years who are would be starting families, would be starting businesses, would be taking on being very productive economically. They're going to get taken out of the Russian economy. They're being mobilized shambolically, it's just a complete clusterfuck.
Right.
And I saw something in one region where the guys were so drunk that were being mobilized, they were passed out on a plane tarmac. And the plane was getting ready to leave, and there were guys in the grass fast asleep, and nobody even noticed. Right? Another one where the mobilizers were fist fighting with the police that were there to put them on the plane, kicking the crap out of these cops. You're getting all the people, anyone who wanted to volunteer for this war volunteered 6 months ago. So
you also have hundreds of thousands of people leaving Russia as a result, they're saying at least, as a result of this draft.
Yeah, I think that is overrated a little bit, but it's certainly a thing. The people who are leaving Russia are the people who have the most resources. And there's not a lot of people who have those kinds of resources in Russia. So what's happening is it's sort of the Vietnam thing, where the people who don't have connections, who don't have a job that puts them out of the pool, who don't have an injury, whatever. It's all these people who don't have an out are being forced to go, who didn't want to go in the first place.
Right.
An element of this that's really wild to me is you got all these people who don't want to go. You're going to give them guns, and you're going to send them. In some cases, they're already showing up. The Russian lines are so sparse with men now that they're just throwing some of them directly into the fight in northern Luhansk around Lyman, and the Ukrainians are still are still taking ground and offensive in northern Luhansk province. It's a town called Lyman that's about to fall, which is the linchpin of the Russian front in northern Luhansk, and that's about to collapse. The Russians are so hurting for men, they're literally taking guys, giving them 2 days refresher course on a rifle and throwing them into combat. They're just getting slaughtered. They're getting slaughtered. They're fighting a Ukrainian army that has a million or 1.5 million men who have been rotating in for 30 days, out for 30 days for 6 months, which means you've got very, very well trained and very experienced Ukrainians who are very well armed going up against guys who have crappy equipment, if they have any at all, who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And the modern battlefield is an enormously dangerous place. Little mistakes get you killed in your dozens. These guys are going to make all kinds of mistakes. And by the way, they're pulling them into the battle. It's about to start raining in the rainy season right before the winter. It's going to rain like hell for a month and a half, and then it's going to start to turn bitterly, incredibly cold. And these guys are going to be, they're not going to be clothed properly, shod properly, etc. So, the way that I try to make this simple for people is I say, like, if big mobs of people were really effective, then every war would look like a zombie movie. Right?
Right.
You would pile up people and race at the other guy, run over and just overwhelm them. The modern battlefield is, if by some weird possibility zombies happened, you would be amazed at how fast they would all be shot to pieces. Right? It's modern weaponry is profoundly dangerous and effective.
Yeah.
So they're basically creating an army of people who don't want to be there, who are going to go to the front and get slaughtered, who are going to be resentful as hell. They're resentful now. 3 months from now, when 2 out of 3 of them are wounded or dead, they're going to be even more resentful. And here's a thing that no one really talks about much. And I try to pick these things out because I think of these things like when I'm reading and I go, no one talks about this, and it's like obviously a big thing. Russia sent its Oman and Rosguardia riot police and sort of public control police all to Ukraine. Okay? This huge... During the beginning of the war.
Right.
Beginning of the war. They've gone and gotten shot to pieces. So this huge, whole organism that was there to support the state and suppress any dissent, the sharp end of it has mostly been destroyed by the Ukrainians because it was sent to fight. So if things really kick off in Russia in enough places at once, they're just not going to have remotely enough riot police to do anything about it. And so you're creating what Lenin would call a revolutionary situation. You're arming the workers, right, who don't like you and are basically only... Your average Russian puts up with Putin because the deal before was, we have effectively a contract. You don't fuck with us in our daily life. We can make money. We can be left alone mostly. And then you go do whatever you do out in the world, right? And make Russia great again, right? Well, what's happening now is that contract has been broken. Putin now is saying, you're going to have to make real sacrifices for my vision, right? And you're going to have to, your economy, the economy in Russia, by the way, is just starting to really crash. So we're not even there yet. That's coming. This winter, that's going to happen. Russian economy is going to go completely in the toilet. You're going to have a ton of people armed who are, at that point, are going to start to say, okay, when does my pain threshold equal the danger of fighting the regime? And that is a tipping point. I don't know exactly where that point is, but it exists. And what Putin is doing is making that more likely. The Bolshevik Revolution, as we talked about this last time, World War I, they were getting completely crushed. And the Minister of War, the provisional government, later on he said, for the sake of the nation's life, it was necessary to restore the army's will to die. What? And that is what he said about the last big offensive that the pre-Bolshevik government launched against the Germans in World War I in 1917 in the summer. Well, he really believed that. He felt like we had we need the aid of the West and we need to prove that Russians are great. So we'll put this last big offensive together to fight the Germans, right? I mean,
how'd that go?
Oh, they got absolutely the door slammed on their dick. And that, by the way, is a technical term. And they got crushed. And then what happened is all of these Bolsheviks, and there was a bit of a coup attempt, a sort of shambolic coup attempt by the army against this guy, Kerensky. And so he armed this party in St. Petersburg and Moscow, he was on the left. They were farther to the left. You may have heard of them. They were called the Bolsheviks. They got armed, and then a couple months later, they said, why the fuck are we letting this asshole Kerensky run things? We have all the guys with the guns right here, right? And the Russian state had been so gutted by World War I and by, the war, losing the war earlier to Japan in 1905, that they couldn't resist it. They got swept away. So you're looking at Putin as creating sort of that potential situation. And again, he's creating it because he's losing the war and his options are diminishing. So fewer and fewer options. This brings us to something else you brought up, and that is whether or not Putin goes nuclear. I have been an optimist on this subject for a long time. I'm much less of an optimist this weekend than I was.
Why? What did you learn that changed your calculus vis-a-vis Putin potentially using some type of a nuclear weapon?
Well, I think, it's clear that we're at an inflection point in the war, right? Putin just pulled the trigger on mobilization. It's already not looking like it's going to do much, right? It may make things worse for them, right? They flood the zone with people who can't fight, who they also have more trouble feeding, right? I mean, if you have 300,000 men there and you send another 600,000, you're already having trouble logistically to handle the 300,000. Now you add 600,000 who can't fight, and then you're really not feeding them, right? I mean, so that issue, like that thing, the mobilization was done to buy time, to hope potentially, in his demented look at this, win the war, or at least hold the war at a point where negotiations that were in his favor could happen later. It looks like it's not going to work already. And so, and by the way, Kherson, the Russians are holding on west of the Dnieper barely, I think. They're going to be pushed farther back in the far northeast. They're getting pushed. This is not going to sit on the lines it's on now. It's going to keep getting pushed back. So he then will have just pulled the trigger on mobilization. It didn't do any good. How many other tricks are there up his sleeve? Right? I mean, what does Putin have? 1 million troops sitting somewhere that we haven't heard of? No. Does he have a big ally that's going to come in and swoop him up and take care of him? No. And especially now, because what we're seeing this last week, and I was watching this with sort of mounting disquiet. There was a story that the North Koreans sold the Russians ammunition, right?
Yeah.
North Korea put out a statement this weekend that said, no, we didn't, and we won't.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Now, that seems like a fairly innocuous, like, who cares, right? North Korea lives at the sufferance of China. The reason that went out, in my opinion, is almost certainly because China said, we need to make as many signals as possible to the Russians that we're not happy about how things are going, and we need to slow them down and tell them to cut the shit, right? The Chinese clearly told them, make that statement, so Russia knows not even you are on their side. Okay, China also met with the Russians last week. Putin's barely gone when the senior minister of their foreign affairs ministry put out a statement saying, we really want everyone to slow this down and no more escalation and basically find a negotiated solution.
The Chinese
Chinese government. It's the most clear statement they've made yet. And Putin just left. I mean, it was obviously aimed at him. And it was obviously in reaction to whatever he told them, which obviously really worried them. India, Putin met with Modi. They had a private conversation. And then when they went in public to be in front of reporters, Modi went out of his way to say, we shouldn't escalate. This war needs to slow down. This needs to stop. NATO today made a statement that could easily be read as NATO saying, that they basically said, if the nuke drops on Ukraine, NATO is conventionally going to get involved. The U.S., our boy Jake Sullivan was on TV all day today saying, we've told the Russians very, very bluntly that we're going to hit them super hard if they do this, and they need to know it'll be absolutely catastrophic for them if they do this. The Irish Taoiseach, which is like their president, right? Ireland's on the Security Council right now. Ireland as a country is really cautious and low-key in diplomacy. They're very good, but they're very low-key. The Taoiseach came to the UN and said yesterday that Russia needs to be thrown off the Security Council. Okay? I'm just looking at all of these sort of things, and the only read to that is they think he's thinking of doing it. And I think they're right. I think he is. And I think that NATO in particular is saying, like, look, we're gonna roll in on you if you do this. That's not something NATO says. It's a like really out there thing, right? It's the whole organization saying it. It's not just one country in the organization saying it, which means their confidence in what they're worried about has to be really, really high. Okay? So what I've always put against this in the past is I think it's an incredibly stupid thing to do, right? I don't think it solves Russia's problems. It doesn't win the war. I suspect that the reaction to the Russians nuking some unknown island in the Black Sea just to show their will to fight is going to be like a trade embargo. If Russia tries to decapitate the Ukrainian government by nuking Kiev, which I think is a fairly, why nuke something if you're not going to try to get a big bang out of it, a big payoff out of it from their perspective? And I get this is all distasteful and awful, but putting yourself in their shoes, why wouldn't you try to make it as hard as possible for the Ukrainians to fight the war by taking out the node of all of their government and military and everything else?
Well, because there's no outcome here that allows for Vladimir Putin to stay in power. And
yes, there is. The outcome is that he's not overthrown in Russia. That's it.
He would be overthrown in Russia if he dropped the nuke, because his own people would be hit by the radiation. Number one, number two,
he doesn't care about them.
Well, no, because the rest of the entire world would say either you step down or we will take you. I mean, his own people would take him. By the way, how many of his own people have to sign off before he uses such a weapon?
My understanding is it takes about 6 hours between ordering it and the weapon launching. Another thing, by the way, that I noticed is there's a weapon called a NASAM, N-A-S-A-M, and it's a Norwegian, very, very effective system for shooting down cruise missiles and other airborne threats. We suddenly just got them 2 NASAM systems, which we had been holding off. They just arrived in Kiev this week. Again, another indicator. You look at these things and you go, man, this is just one thing after another. We are preparing. And by the way, they announced they got the NASAMs, right? Which is basically like saying to the Russians, you're going to try to throw a missile at us, might be able to shoot it down.
That's a weapon system that can shoot down a nuclear missile.
It could shoot down a cruise missile. I think the terminal velocity of an ICBM would be too hard for it. Because an ICBM comes in at like crazy speed, like 2,000 miles per hour. But something smaller, it would have a chance, yes. Or something, delivered by an airplane, it would have a chance at that. But I don't think that there's a guarantee in any way that the military in Russia would shoot him or stop him from launching a nuke. I don't think there's any guarantee of that.
Why not? Why would that not be a likely situation?
Look at what they're going along with right now. The Russians know, the Russian military knows, Putin knows, that they committed, 300 or 400 war crimes in Bucha, that there's 40 or 50 people that were tortured, castrated, and murdered there were 400 people that were killed in Irpin, but now they're finding that a bunch of them were tortured and castrated, and the Russian government literally just doesn't even have anything to say to them.
Yeah, but the Russian government has been committing war crimes for as long as Putin has been in charge, and whether the Russian public knows about it, much less cares about it, is far different and separate from a nuclear weapon being used, where it could also affect them. The whole rest of the world, I mean, I think you told me here before, China would not allow for it. I mean, and what would they do as a result?
I think for China, this is a nightmare. Because if Russia launches a nuke, then, and the sort of idea of that nuke is we can commit an aggression and then use our nukes to hold on to it. Taiwan has the technical capability to have a nuclear weapon in probably 6 weeks or half a year, maybe at the worst. Taiwan will get nukes immediately. Japan will get nukes immediately. Indonesia will get, for China, this is just fucked up.
If Russia used a nuke, you're saying everybody else is going to want one?
100%.
Why is that?
Because they don't want China to be able to attack them, take a big chunk of their land or all of it.
Why would China be able to attack? I mean, if Russia uses a nuke, why would
China, they would, if you're Taiwan, you look at Russia attacking Ukraine.
Yeah.
And you say, so they took it or took part of it and were able to hold on to it by then just dropping a demonstration nuke so no one could fight back, right? If you're Taiwan, you say, okay, what's the solution to that? Well, Ukraine's problem was they got rid of their nuclear weapons. If they had nuclear weapons in the first place, this never would have happened. And so everybody,
as a way to defend from I see what you're saying. Yeah,
correct. You've a gun held to your head, or Ukraine has a gun held to its head. So now all of us have to get guns to make sure that no one do that to us.
Right.
So for China, this is just incredibly bad news. It's not, they're smart enough and they're not crazy enough. They're looking at this as a disaster. So I think Russia would be a pariah state forever after that. But that is not necessarily something these guys care about. We don't know that. There's no evidence that, these are the people that are committing war crimes and just are like, whatever. Yeah, you don't like it? Fuck you.
I hear you, but war crimes are different than, these types of war crimes are different than detonating a nuclear weapon.
This is the country that starved to death, 6 million Ukrainians during the Holodomor? What's the number? Something crazy like that?
Again, a horrific human rights crime, just a genocide. But
so and by the way, Russian, if you follow what the Julie Davis and what you see on Russian TV right now, the language is genocidal language. They're saying things like Ukraine and Ukrainians can no longer exist.
Yeah,
this is a state, an elite in a state that has become as fully genocidally fascist. Not as fully as the Nazis were, but they're well on their way. They're well on their way. And so we're in a really, I'm not feeling good about it. I'm really not. I think the US is doing exactly what it should do. But I think that you depend on both sides having some sense of proportion and some sense. And it's clear that is not the feeling the Russians are giving anybody, including India and China, their putative, at least semi-friendly powers, right?
Right.
So it's bad. It's bad. It's really bad. And I think it's going to be a tough, because I'll tell you, Pete, they drop a nuke, particularly if it's on a major, urban place. We'll be shooting down Russian planes within a week. There will be Marines marching through Kherson. The idea will be to conventionally destroy Russia's military directly. That's going to be, Biden in some ways, Biden's been around a long time. I don't think since George Bush Sr. have we had somebody who has the clarity of vision to look at this and say, okay, this is what we need to do. Because if you let it happen, and if you fail in the face of it, it's just going to keep happening again, and all that proliferation I was talking about is going to happen. And then the world becomes a much darker and much more dangerous place. And I don't think we can let it pass. I just don't. And I would very strongly suspect the White House feels that way as well.
Well, Vladimir Putin doesn't want to be a pariah state.
I don't know at this point if Russia's going to be a pariah state as long as Vladimir Putin's alive.
Well, yeah, to a far lesser extent, or would be to a far greater extent if they were to go nuclear.
Yes, and I think you would see a trade embargo. I think you would see the Chinese wouldn't help them at all. In fact, they would probably, I was talking to a smart friend of mine and yours, you've met him, and he said, look at it this way. If you're China and you're looking at the Russians, are you thinking, oh shit, the Russians got away with this in Ukraine. What's to stop them from trying it on us? Right? Like the only reason Russia and China are quote unquote friends is that they get mutual benefit out of each other. But if Vladimir Putin realizes that he can use his nukes to coerce everyone, he can do the same thing to China. He can try it, right? And in other words, he is now somebody that nobody can put anything past. There are no limits. He'll do whatever he wants to do, and he'll destroy hundreds of thousands of people for some nebulous idea of Russian greatness. You can't trust somebody like that. They are a danger to themselves and everyone around them. And so China will bail, India will bail. India is Russia's biggest arms client. They buy the most arms from Russia. I think it's $6 billion or more worth in the last 6 years. India will say, okay, we're done. We're not.
Yeah, and who's left to buy what's left of their gas and oil too? I mean.
Well, and yeah, their gas and their oil.
People will starve if they use nukes.
Russia will revert to a fourth world place over time, almost as bad as Britain after Brexit, you could say. That was a joke.
I was like, what? Did it get that bad?
Britain's heading that way. Actually, I think Larry Summers said Britain is not an emerging economy; it's a submerging economy.
Well, Larry Summers is probably right.
But I think I normally can't stand fuck himself. He's spot on that one. But so the situation we're in is bad, and I think the Russians are about to get booted out of Kherson in the west of the Dnieper. I think they're about to lose even more in the northeast, and I think the temptations are going to be enormously powerful to try to flip the chessboard and try to do something. And
a lot of things can happen between now and that possibility. A lot of things that folks don't even predict, including someone within Russia, within the Russian highest ranking leadership, taking him out.
You can guarantee, given how obviously well informed the U.S. has been about what's going on in Russia and what was going on before the war started, you can bet the U.S. is talking to a lot of people in Russia.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, the risks of going against Putin are enormous if you're in Russia. And, the rape and torture of your entire family in front of you, right, if you don't succeed. And that's a tough thing to face. So the question is, when do things get desperate enough for someone to take him out before he does something that can't be taken back, or something worse that can't? He doesn't.
I say next Wednesday,
dude. From your lips to to Joseph Stalin's ear, man, that would be amazing. Like this guy needs to die. He needs to die, and soon, because we're in a really dangerous place right now. We're in an incredibly dangerous place right now.
Bill, Shana Tova, I guess, is really what you're trying to say. Shana Tova.
My Lebanese friend, Shana Tova.
Yes. I just talked with Maura Quint on today's show, and she was cooking up a storm for Rosh Hashanah, and we're sitting here talking about potential.
So she got a bit, she's a fob. She's a friend of Pete, as far as I'm concerned.
Uh-huh.
So she posted something about bagels and how she liked this bagel place in DC. And I slid into her DMs and was like, that place sucks. Here's the place that you should go.
Yeah.
But you promise you never tell anybody. I am that guy who tells people quietly where the really good shit is in Washington. But the deal is, I don't want to see it on Twitter. I don't want to run into Jake Tapper on a Friday morning when I'm going to buy bagels. It's not my thing.
Is Jake Tapper go buy bagels Friday morning? Is that?
No, but like you see places get popular.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden Jim Acosta is standing out front on his cell phone. And you're like, fuck, okay, this is over. I've got to go.
If you see Acosta, it means that's it. It's cooked.
It's done. Yeah. You see someone like Acosta, or, if you're seeing print journalists, well, they don't really matter. So but you start seeing CNN, it's on the downhill. And if you start seeing Fox, then you're in fucking Northern Virginia already.
How often do you see somebody walk around in DC? Every time I'm down there, I feel like I see someone that I recognize and want to punch in the face. And I don't even say anything to them, but last time I was down there, I was parked out. I was near Capitol Hill, near Union Station. Well, actually right in front of Fox News and NBC, Washington, D.C. bureaus share basically the same block. And I saw Jonathan Turley walking in to Fox News, and I wanted to run and tackle him. Of course, I sat there in my car and didn't say a word. But
a buddy of mine went to GW Law School and knew Turley then. I guess Turley was like a associate professor back then.
Mm-hmm.
And this is 25 years ago. And he said the amazing thing about Jonathan Turley is he was just as deeply an asshole then as he is now.
Yeah, he's got the Ted Cruz rap.
Yeah, he's awful. I mean, you see people in D.C. I'm not, I don't spend a lot of time on Capitol Hill or by the White House, but you see people fairly often. I saw your friend John King in an elevator up in Maryland once. And you just run into people, but it's the they're in the local industry, right? That's kind of it.
Did you pay any attention this week to the announcement from the New York Attorney General Tish James about the Trump Organization? And
I swear to God, I did not open champagne at all on that. I really didn't. No, I love that story. I love that case because it's really going to fuck him up.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts on it?
Yeah. So the people are saying, well, why isn't SDNY investigating it? And why aren't the feds doing it? As a criminal thing, it's actually hard. It's a harder burden of proof.
So just to be clear, SDNY is the federal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And the question you're saying, why people are asking, why isn't the federal jurisdiction charging Trump with the same crime? Why is it the New York Attorney General? And the answer is because it would have to be criminal. And in this case, the Attorney General has filed civil charges, which is her purview.
Exactly. And civil charges are much easier to prove.
Right.
In the federal criminal one, you'd have
we
to
all learned that when the Goldman sued OJ.
Bingo. Yes, exactly. And in the federal ones, you have to show that somebody took a loss. And, does Deutsche Bank want to admit that they got completely burned on doing these deals with Trump? No, they don't want to admit it.
Oh, interesting.
So there's all these other issues that you have to deal with in a federal criminal case that she doesn't have to worry about. What she's also going after, by the way, is something that probably every single New York developer does on like a minor level, right? They inflate the value or cut the value by 10%. What's wild with Trump is he took apartments that were worth $7.5 million and said they were worth $270 million. Like he's always been fucking crazy because he did, there's one thing to bend the rules. He just blew right through them.
Yeah.
So I think he loses without question. He gets killed in this case. And the latest that I saw is that the potential fines and fees and everything else could add up to as much as $1 billion. And he doesn't have, the thing about Trump is he has no cash.
Yeah, I heard that this week. Yeah. The guy's got no liquid cash, and he's always, dealing with debt, which is the truth. Apparently the case with a lot of super wealthy people, although he's not even super wealthy, apparently. And he's losing. I mean, you don't have to know much to think he's not making new deals the way he used to. Nobody wants to put, he made his bread and butter just in licensing, putting his name on the side of a building or a bottle of water or whatever it was. No one's doing that. That's a shit brand now.
Yeah, exactly. And he basically is making his money by pretty fraudulent political fundraising.
Yeah,
right?
he's making money grifting people, asking them 10 times a day to send him $5.
Right. And what's going to happen is he's eventually going to get hit for that too. That's not going to last. At some point, some AG is going to say, this is obviously deceptive. It's not being used for politics. I mean, all the money he raised for senatorial campaigns, supposedly, still sitting in the bank. It's $100 million.
I read that today. Everybody does this. They ask for money. I mean, everybody's getting emails, but they use the money, generally speaking, on the campaign. I mean, Trump notoriously uses it for himself. He buys stuff.
He's basically throwing it in the bank and letting it's sort of like the documents at Mar-a-Lago. It's rainy day fund money.
Yeah.
Right. If he really gets into trouble, he'll jump on a plane to Saudi Arabia. He'll kick the money over to the Isle of Jersey or something. And then he'll say, fuck you, sue me. I'm 76. I'm going to be dead in 10 years. What are you going to do? You're never going to get me back in that time.
Yeah. Well, that's what Roy Cohn did.
Exactly.
Well, close to it.
And Roy Cohn is, Trump's amanuensis.
Yeah, that's why I'm sure he wants to go out owing billions of dollars. And it's a weird thing because he's leaving it to his his family. What else? And what do you think about the documents case? What do you think about this special master just being like, get the fuck out of here? No, letting DOJ continuing the investigation. And what I keep hearing is they've got him dead to rights. It's documents. He stole documents, and you don't have to be a legal analyst to know the only important point ever was that he had to have a reason to have those documents. He's He's just a civilian. That's all he is now. He has no right to those documents. And why did he get to have them, even if they were, quote, declassified, just by thinking about it? I mean, I feel like that case is pretty tightly shut.
I think it's a shoo-in. I think it's a chip shot. Name any other cliche you want to. They're going to get him on that. The only issue with that for them was that initially it could have been like, if Trump had been smart, they would have said, you know what, we fucked up. We didn't handle it very well.
Right.
Here you go.
They could have just given it all back when given the opportunity. They were given the opportunity to return them. It's like when you're a kid and you stole a bunch of money or you stole something, you return part of it. If you just returned all of it, you wouldn't have
Well, here's the thing, though, Pete, right? He clearly there was just sort of the massive documents that were dumped in that room, these boxes, right? But then he had that leather box that he kept in his office, in his safe. I'm telling you, we're never going to know what was in those files. But I would be willing to bet one or the other of my testicles that those things were exactly the kind of thing a foreign government would give you $1 billion for.
Yeah, no, it was all a value to him. It was all a way to make money or to blackmail.
All blackmail and or my get out of jail free card when I jet off to get away from an indictment for Georgia or something. Trump is a flight risk. Super.
Yeah,
clear.
you said that a couple times. I never really hear people talk about him as a flight risk. That would be a hilarious ending.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly,
is he going to do rallies from which foreign government will protect him?
I think he would go to Saudi. Saudi Arabia would be the one. That's where Idi Amin spent his old age.
Very hot here. Is always this hot? Is it going to cool down at all?
Exactly. Mohammed, can I get the Idi Amin suite? I've always wanted that one. He'll be sitting at his pool in the 80-degree weather, bitching about, cutting out articles about himself in a paper version of the New York Times. That I think is the ultimate likely end of Trump. And
that'd be amazing.
Way, Lincoln's attitude towards Jefferson Davis was let him run overseas. Lincoln was hoping that Jefferson Davis would get away because Lincoln was smart and he knew that Jefferson Davis sitting in Mexico was a much more like that just would diminish him to nothing, right? And I think it's true of Trump. If you could kind of, Trump gets chased out of the country, is MAGA going to stick with him if he's sitting in Saudi Arabia? I don't think so. It looks different.
Trump in exile.
Oh my God, right? The king over the water would be amazing. But I think he's in a lot of trouble. And I think I think, as I've been saying for a long time, it will just become harder not to indict him than it will to indict him.
Yep. I agree with that.
I just hope we don't all die in a nuclear conflagration.
Oh, you had to go back to that.
I'm worried, dude. I'm worried. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Well, we're not all going to die. I mean,
I will. Yes.
It's going to be located in Ukraine, the nuclear blast. You think he's going to... Huh?
Round one, for sure.
Yeah. Will you put down your... I don't know, whatever novels you're reading? I appreciate your concern and your realistic point of view here on it, though. It's a great way to start off the week. Thank you.
I know. Really, I'm very sorry. But at least I gave, Ms. Quint the place to get good bagels.
Yeah.
Before we all die in it.
All right, bud. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Awesome.
Talk to you later.
Okay, cool.
All right, there he goes, Bill B, at Bill B in DC on Twitter, at Behind Your Back on Twitter. That's Maura Quint. And thank you very much for tuning in. If you'd like to help out promoting the show, pulling video clips and sharing ideas, join the Stand Up with Pete Dominic Street Team. This is our show. Everybody gets to be a producer. It's grassroots. It's independent as can be, and you get to contribute and have a huge impact on how other people hear and see the show. So sign up. Just email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Put Street Team in the subject, and we'll get you looped in. Thank you very much for listening to this Monday show. I greatly appreciate it. Looking forward to sharing my conversation with Dr. Christina Greer on tomorrow's episode and more. We'll see what I've got cooked up for you for the rest of the week. Who would you like to hear? Let me know. Thank you very much for supporting the show, and sign up for a subscription if you haven't already. This is your week. Come on, standupwithpete.com. Learn everything you can along the journey with us, and hang out anytime on the Discord platform. Thursday nights at 8 p.m. on the Hangout, the Happy Hour Hangouts. Hope to see you this week because we are on. I'm out of here. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you guys. Goodbye.
You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.